This is the Office Memo, a podcast about podcasting for entrepreneurs and business owners. If you want to differentiate yourself from your competitors and bring your marketing to the next level, you need to start a podcast. We will give you tips on creating the best possible podcast for your business so you can reach those potential clients and set yourself apart in your market. This memo you will definitely want to hear. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Office Memo, where we talk about everything that is related to podcasting. I'm going to start off with a question. Are you using your podcast to its fullest potential for your business? If you are not, it is a waste of time, money, and effort you are putting into creating a podcast. A podcast will add extra value to your marketing and could even be leading. You can reuse and repurpose your podcast content in many different ways and for many different marketing purposes. Why would you want to create new content all the time when you can use a podcast as a basis and start creating new ideas from a single episode? And if you use your podcast SEO in the correct way, you can attract a lot more visitors to your website. Did you know, for example, that Google indexes the audio file of an episode? Check out an earlier episode I did with Jen Kurtek, podcast SEO specialist, where she explains everything related to podcast SEO and especially why it is so important. So listening to that episode after this one is your next step to using all that a podcast has to offer. The link will be in the description. So back to your podcast. You see others doing it and you listen to a couple of inspirational podcasts and that sparked the idea to start one yourself. You hear or you read about other podcasts that rave about the podcast listeners they have and you struggle to get 50 listeners per episode. A successful podcast doesn't just happen. It depends on all kinds of variations and all of them need to be aligned. The podcast world is constantly changing. It is still a very young business, so new technologies, new ideas are popping up all of the time. And it can be difficult to keep up with that next to your core business and day-to-day life. So besides creating a great quality podcast with the right artwork, the right podcast description, it also needs to be found. That means adding it to all the podcast players and using the right keywords. Yep, there it is again, podcast SEO. Followed by a very good promotional strategy. I've said this before on this podcast, but why would you just start a podcast without proper research, without a proper launch strategy, without using your podcast to its fullest potential for your business? You probably didn't know what it all entails, and I understand that. But let's put on the brakes for a moment. I'm going to ask you the following questions. Do you want more visitors to your website? Do you want more followers on social media? Do you want to have more engagement with your community? Do you want more subscribers to your podcast? Do you want to make money with your podcast? Do you want to show that you are the expert in your field of work and that you are the person to hire, the person for the job? If you're saying yes to all of this, then let's talk. If you're not ready to hire us to produce your podcast, at least let us do a podcast audit and podcast SEO analysis. In a podcast audit, we will look over your podcast hosting setup to see if it's submitted to sufficient podcast players. We will evaluate your podcast website or podcast page and review your technical setup, your podcast equipment, and give feedback on changes that might be needed in recording techniques and microphone usage. We will do an overall review of one episode, including audio quality, speaking, and interview skills. Next to that, assess your episode titles, description, and show notes to make sure they are SEO proof. See how important it is because this is the third time I'm mentioning it. Okay, moving on. We will do an overhaul of your marketing strategy so that more people will know about and visit your podcast. And all of this will be added to a report, which we will discuss during a consultancy call where we'll give you a plan to take your podcast to the next level. Even if your podcast is doing okay, it will be a good idea to see if you have missed some key ingredients that make a good podcast a great podcast. With a few tips and ideas for improvement and change, you will be able to use your podcast to its fullest potential for your business. Contact information in the description and in the outro. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye. Many thanks for listening. We hope you liked the episode. If you want to start a podcast with our assistance, please feel free to contact us at info@lagerservices.com. Until next time.